welcome to round two of the Ohio Senate debate right here in the city of Cleveland at the City of God Church, right here located at 742 East 152nd Street in Cleveland, Ohio. Tonight, our candidates for the Ohio Senate debate is none other than Miss Morgan Harper and Mr. Josh Mandel. Can you please put your hands together for both of our candidates? And again, Mr. Josh Mandel. Before we begin, my colleague tonight, Mr. Dimitri Balisaris, will read off and give you the directions for tonight.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Just Dimitri is fine. Last name, I can't get it right. They think I'm kidding. The format is going to be a short opening statements, 1 to 2 minutes, and we'll get right to the questions. We're going to alternate questions directed to one candidate, with the other candidate given a chance to respond, and then the original candidate will have the final rebuttal. For example, the first question will be to candidate A, and I believe tonight it's going to be to Ms. Harper. She'll have 1.5 minutes to answer, up to 1.5 minutes to answer. Then candidate B, in this case, Mr. Mandel, will get 1 minute to respond, and then candidate A, in this case, Ms. Harper, gets a 30-second rebuttal. And then we're going to alternate, and then the closing statements at the end are going to be the same as the opening statements with a maximum of roughly 2 minutes, and we've got timekeepers who will help the candidates keep track of the time so we don't chop them off quickly at the end. So, check.
There you have it. So let's get right into it. Let's get into round two. I'm excited. First question to Miss Harper. Thank you again for coming out tonight and being here. My question to you is dealing with, yes, you want you to do your opening statement. Yep, there you go.
All right. Well,
We knew that. We just want to see if you folks
that was
are
the
paying
first
attention.
question.
That was the first.
They're all pretty sharp.
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you so much to our moderators this evening, and thank you to Pastor Early for allowing us to be in his space and hosting us in his congregation. My name is Morgan Harper. I'm running to be your next United States Senator because Ohio needs a new path forward, new leadership, not more of the same old politics. How I got to this point has a lot to do with my Ohio story. I was born in Columbus, given up for adoption. I lived in a foster home as an infant and was adopted and raised by my mom, who immigrated to Cleveland from Trinidad in the 1960s. And because of her having one solid union job in the public school system and a strong community around us, she was able to pour everything into my education. It took me all the way to Princeton University and Stanford Law School. But while I was away, Ohio was changing, and the possibility of my story being every child's story is slipping away. When I got to Washington to work during the Obama administration at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, I started to understand why. We were taking on the big banks that caused the financial and foreclosure crisis, and I witnessed a generation of politicians that have bought and sold away our futures to protect themselves and the corporate interests who fund them. We do not have a policy problem. We have a politician problem, and I want to change that. I refuse to take corporate PAC money. I will stand on the side of working people and fight for a pro-worker agenda that will create clean energy jobs all over our state, universal health care, making sure that we are earning enough to live. I have always stood on the side of working people. I have always stood for a woman's right to choose against the NRA and the other special interests that currently run Washington, D.C. My name is Morgan Harper. I'm running to be your United States Senator. Ohio, it is our turn, and I look forward to discussing the issues tonight.
Mr. Mandel, your opening statement.
Thank you all for having us here tonight. It's great to be at this church in the city of Cleveland. I grew up not too far from here. My grandfather grew up on Kinsman and went to John Adams High School. My grandmother grew up on Lakeview, went to Glenville High School, and we've lived in Northeast Ohio our entire life. I'm running for the United States Senate for 3 main reasons. Gideon, who's my 5-year-old, Judah, who's my 7-year-old, and Rosie, who's my 8-year-old. I believe the radical left, led by people like Morgan Harper, AOC, Sherrod Brown, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, and other radical leftists are trying to take down our country. President Reagan talked about that shining city on the hill. President Trump talked about being America first. Unfortunately, the radical leftists in this country are trying to ruin America for our kids and grandkids. Now, why would they do that? They want to do that because they believe in this quote-unquote global community, where if they could just bring America down a couple pegs and bring other countries up, the world will be a better place. I completely reject that premise. I think the world is a safer place, and America is a stronger place when America leads. When the American economy is the strongest in the world, where American jobs are put before jobs of people from other countries, where American citizens are put before illegal immigrants. And as long as we have 40,000 military veterans who served in the Marine Corps, like I did, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, living under bridges, we should not be thinking about we're spending any tax money on people from other countries.
You have to stop. We want to make sure we adhere to the rules tonight, and we appreciate your opening. First question to you, Ms. Harper. I want to talk about community college, free college. There has been a lot of talk about canceling student debt and also passing legislation that would allow for free college. Where do you stand on that? And if elected, how do you move forward in getting that passed?
So this is a policy that I support, and actually just this past week we wrapped up a 10-city tour of Ohio, Opportunity Guarantee Tour. That's what we're after. We are trying to guarantee opportunity for every Ohioan, regardless of where you live in our state. And part of that is making sure that we have debt-free training and educational opportunities for our young people. So that is something that needs to happen as soon as possible, and preferably in the clean energy sector, which is going to be a sector of the future. And I also support canceling student debt. We have burdened a generation of young people with this debt, many of whom in all sorts of jobs and occupations have no ability to pay back this debt in any time in the short term over their adult lives. I was just talking to someone today in Cleveland who was saying that they couldn't purchase a home because of how high their student debt payments are. We need to cancel it. This will be an economic boon for our state and ensure that we're not just supporting the tax cuts for the large corporations like my opponent here tonight and my opponent in the Democratic primary who is funded by corporate interests, that we are going to have a U.S. Senator who is on the side of us, of working people, of our communities, and creating a state of the future.
What Ms. Harper does not mention is that if you were to cancel student debt, someone has to pay for that. And you want to know who pays for that? It's truck drivers who are working hard every day in places like Cleveland, Ohio. It's waitresses who are working hard every day, like the waitress I met, Teresa, in Octa, Ohio, who works at a Waffle House. It's carpenters. It's electricians. It's blue-collar men and women. It's service workers who might not have a college degree, but they're working hard, they've got great jobs, they're doing everything they can to put food on the table for their families. Think about it for a second. Why is it fair to Teresa, that waiter at Waffle House, that waitress at Waffle House, or Roy, the truck driver in Youngstown, or Dave, the carpenter in Akron, or Elisa, the nurse in Cincinnati? Why is it fair to them to have their tax dollars pay for someone like Morgan, who went to Princeton and Stanford?
No one is talking about that. So first of all, any of the people you mentioned, you're telling me that they talked about complaining about paying back student debt. That was what workers and waitresses were talking about, their top priority issue. I highly, highly doubt that. What we're talking about is closing tax loopholes for very large corporations like those who fund my opponent, both here tonight and in the Democratic primary, who don't pay their fair share. We don't have a level playing field. So once we close those, we're creating more revenue. Another source of revenue, stopping these endless wars
Miss-
that have no strategy, that are losing lives,
Miss
and
Harper,
only enrich
We
defense
have to
contractors.
follow the time. Thank you for that. Dimitri, it's on you.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know if this is on. It is? All right, great, thank you. Mr. Mandel, you've been talking about taking on your own party and the party establishment. Well, you've also been talking about being a loyal Trump supporter, and yet he still has not endorsed you. So, if the president endorses one of your opponents, and then asks Josh Mandel to step aside, would your loyalty to Trump force you to end your campaign?
I'm doing everything I can to earn the endorsement and the support of President Trump. There's only one candidate in this race, only one, who's been unwavering in his support of the Trump America First agenda, and that's me. In fact, when all my other opponents were with John Kasich to the bitter end in 2016, I was the first statewide official in Ohio who came out for President Trump. When a lot of the folks who ended up endorsing him anyway got jelly knees, and when the Access Hollywood tapes came out, they rescinded their endorsement, I stuck with him because I knew that he would be a much better president than Hillary Clinton. I actually have one of my opponents who refused to vote for him and said he was going to hold his nose and vote for Hillary Clinton. And I personally believe that President Trump was the best president in my lifetime. And so respectfully, I reject the premise of the question because I am doing everything I can to earn the president's support. And I'm confident I will earn the president's support as long as I keep doing what I'm doing, which means leading in the polls, which means advancing the America First agenda, which means being a fighter, not just a fighter against radical leftists like Morgan Harper, who's totally out of touch with everyone in Ohio, but also being a fighter against squishy establishment rhino Republicans like Liz Cheney, Anthony Gonzalez, and Adam Kinzinger.
Well, let's talk about flip-flopping, because I do believe Marco Rubio is probably a name that's familiar to you, someone that you supported before Donald Trump. And that's about what you would expect from somebody who is a career politician and moves with whichever way the political winds are blowing to benefit their careers. But let's talk about America first, let's talk about Ohio first, and let's talk about what I'm hearing from real Ohioans and what they want. We want better paying jobs. That's why we have a plan to create up to 600,000 clean energy jobs that will be union protected over the next 10 years. People want to make sure that they have health care, that we're not living through these drug epidemics that are resulting in the loss of life and these increased healthcare costs because of big insurance companies, big pharma, who are funding your campaign and also the campaign of my Democratic primary opponent. So that's what the people of Ohio want. We are ready for change. We are ready for leadership that is unbought and unafraid and every day working for real Ohioans.
Would you like to, you got 30 seconds, you good?
Rather not? Okay, fair enough. Next question is for Ms. Harper. You were interviewed in December by Cleveland TV station Fox 8. During that interview, you were asked, quote, to a Democratic voter, what's the pitch? Why not Tim Ryan? How are you guys different? End quote. Ms. Harper, you answered, I can win. I can win. Ms. Harper, would you please tell us how many elections you have won and how many elections Mr. Ryan has won?
So the question was, what makes me different from Tim Ryan, my opponent in the Democratic primary? This is my second time running for office, and in fact, one of the things that is most important right now for us in Ohio is that we put an end to this era of career politicians who are bought and sold to corporate interests, like my opponent here tonight and my opponent in the Democratic primary. So that's what I hear from Ohioans, that we are looking for leadership that is for us, and that is the promise that I'm making to Ohio voters. And what are we going to do? Because this isn't just about getting me elected to United States Senate. This is about a win for all of us, creating the jobs that are going to make sure that I'm not meeting 30-year-olds in Lima who are scared to death about the fact that they are on a picket line and they thought that they would have 10 to 20 years of job security. It's about making sure that we are addressing the climate crisis and creating those jobs. So that is the message to Ohioans, that we can guarantee opportunity for every Ohioan, and that is going to be a message that resonates and drives historic levels of turnout that we are going to need to have a Democrat win this seat. My opponent has had no answers over the past 20 years, both the one here today and in the Democratic primary, because both of them are career politicians. They have not had a message for the people, and we need to embrace change right now as Ohio Democrats to have any shot of not just winning this seat, but also winning our future for our state and our young people.
I was at a local bar and restaurant called Town Hall right before it here, about 15 minutes from here. It's West 25th in Ohio City. And I told them where I was going. I said I was going to debate Morgan Harper, and they said, "Who's Morgan Harper?" And I said, "She's like AOC, only she's smarter." And I will tell you this, Morgan is very smart. Went to Princeton, went to Stanford, all this stuff. She's also even more out of touch with Ohio and America than AOC. Think about that for a second. AOC is totally disconnected from her state, from our state, and our country. Morgan's even to her left. And what you just heard here is a bunch of platitudes. She talks about for us, by us, and this and that. It's a bunch of slogans they put on bumper stickers and slogans she might say over and over and over again. She sounds like a robot saying it because she said it so many times. But the reality is, someone like her who supports the Green New Deal, defund the police, and all these radical policies will never get elected in the state of Ohio.
All right.
Well, so interesting because I do believe third time running for the same seat. So let's talk about track record of winning elections, okay? But also, let me just remind and also introduce myself to people in Cleveland who have not heard of me before. My name is Morgan Harper. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. And in the weakest and most challenging moments for my family, it is a strong community that rallied around us when we were packing our stuff in trash bags to get out of an abusive household and escaping to Cleveland to be able to rebuild our lives, that made it possible for me to work my butt off to get to places and get scholarships to places like Princeton and Stanford. That's something you wouldn't know about because you're just used to getting whatever you want.
Morgan, why are you so angry? Just like relax.
Please, folks, please, we agreed to the rules. Everybody agreed to the rules. We're going to follow the rules.
Also, sound man, can you make sure that our mics are working, please? Our mics are not working.
Thank you.
Okay, you turned them on. Well, I'm going to speak loud. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Mr. Mandel, in your previous debate, you referred to Black Lives Matter as thugs.
Uh-huh. And then he come in the black community.
Hey, you're not doing that.
Put him out.
Please.
You mean like put him out like with a bullet?
Mr. Mandel.
What do you mean put him out?
Mr. Mandel.
Ask him to leave.
Mr. Mandel.
Oh, I
He
thought
don't
this was
belong in the
America.
black community.
I thought this was America where we can debate freely.
Hey, sister, listen to me. Don't do that. I got this. Don't do that.
They shouldn't have let him in.
No, this is America. He can be here. Don't do that. Don't embarrass me.
I'm not
No,
embarrassing.
No, you don't
But
do
to
that.
bring that white man
No, you
in the
got to-
black
hey,
community
excuse me,
like that.
You don't have to leave, man.
I'm
if you
finished.
Okay.
But
please.
don't you suck
Ma'am,
up to him.
Listen.
He's in the black
I'm
community.
doing my job, and I'm
He's
asking
calling
you
my
to
parents
relax.
thugs.
Ma'am,
Make
I'm
him answer
the
the
moderator.
question.
I'm in charge. I want you to sit down and be quiet.
Let me tell you something, ma'am.
Mr. Mandel.
I put my
Let
life
him
in the
talk.
hands of
Mr.
young black
Mandel.
guys.
Mr.
I had young black
Mandel.
men put their life in my hand in the United
Mr.
States Marine
Mandel.
Corps and 2 tours in
I'm
Iraq.
asking you to
So don't
stop,
stand
sir.
there and lecture me.
I
Mr.
was
Those are
Mandel.
my
calling
brothers.
post. Keep
Whether
going.
they were black or they were white
Mr.
or they were
Man.
Hispanic or they were Asian, those are my brothers in the Marine Corps. So don't
Listen.
stand there and lecture me about race and color.
Mr.
We put our
Mandel.
lives in each other's
Mr.
hands.
Mandel.
Those are my brothers as Marines.
Mr. Mandel, I'm the moderator over here. I'm asking you to pay attention to me. And ma'am, you in the calling post, will you please stop?
All right.
Mr. Mandel, again, you referred to Black Lives Matter as thugs. On January 6th, there was an insurrection where we, our country, our nation, even the world witnessed a takeover, raiding of an attempt to take over the United States Capitol to stop or have an attempt to stop the former Vice President Mike Pence from confirming the electoral votes that would have confirmed that President Joe Biden actually won the 2020 election. My question to you is, these men and women who raided the Capitol, they
urinated on the halls, in offices in the United States Capitol, which is a historic building. They also left feces, defecation in that building as well. And it was described as an attack on America's democracy. So my question to you is, do you consider the insurrectionists thugs? And if not, why?
Listen, I think the word insurrection is completely inaccurate for what happened that day. I do think there were, some people who committed crimes, and obviously they're working their way through the justice system. But at the end of the day, what violates my sensibilities over the past year or two in respect to behavior in that regard that you're describing is organizations like Black Lives Matter that burnt down police stations in places like Minneapolis, organizations like Antifa that assaulted police officers. Both of those organizations, Black Lives Matter and Antifa, who came to Euclid Avenue about 10 minutes from here. And they said they were going to do a peaceful protest and march down Euclid Avenue. But you know what they did? They went into the store of a lady who owns a cupcake store. And they took 2x4s and baseball bats. And they bashed her store open.
Ma'am.
And they destroyed her store. She and her workers were so scared for their life that they had to hide in the bathroom for fear of their life. And so you can describe it however you want to describe it, but it's that type of behavior from Black Lives Matter and from Antifa that we have to stop. It's that type of behavior that is piercing the heart of this republic.
Ms. Harper, you kill.
So, in terms of threats to the republic and our democracy, I think most of us in our state and in this room can agree that what occurred on January 6th was a very clear attempt to not just undermine our democracy, but also to threaten lives. So let's talk about what happened. And that's what's really, really hard to listen to from my opponent, is the complete disregard for the lives that were lost on January 6th. Law enforcement officers who were trying to protect sitting elected officials whose lives were lost that day and in subsequent days due to suicide. That's what happened. That is tragic. And to have someone like my opponent trying to distract from that, to have the RNC trying to call that legitimate political discourse is abhorrent. And it is exactly why we cannot let him anywhere near the United States Senate. And what do we need to do to make that happen?
Vote them out.
We need to make sure that everybody all over Northeast Ohio, Cleveland, all over our state knows that we got to mobilize right now
Amen.
to turn out
Amen.
and ensure that we have people that are on the side of the republic, on the side of democracy, and actually respect our
Okay,
freedom
Ms. Harper.
and what it means to be an
I wanted
American
to
in
give
the
you
U.S.
a little
Senate.
time because of the words that was exchanged, so to give you opportunity, that's why we extended the time.
I'll rebut that. Just to borrow a couple words you used, abhorrent and tragic. That's how I would describe what happened to the police station and policemen in Minneapolis when Black Lives Matter burned it down. It's how I would describe what happened to my friend Paul and Lucinda, who live in Columbus, Ohio, when Black Lives Matter bashed their home in Columbus. Or when Black Lives Matter and Antifa bashed the State House in Columbus, the People's House. But somehow your silence in respect to Black Lives Matter and Antifa and their criminal activity is deafening.
Not silence. I'm focused on loss of
Hey,
life. You're
okay.
talking
Thank
about.
I want to thank you, Dimitri. So, the insurrectionists, they attacked the Capitol to stop the confirmation of the electoral votes that to confirm President Joe Biden. Do you believe, Mr. Mandel, and you can rebut this too, that the system of voting needs to change? Should it just be based on the electoral vote, or should it be based on the popular vote, or should we just keep the same system? Go ahead, Mr. Mandel.
Question for me. I feel strongly about keeping and maintaining the Electoral College. We have the Electoral College for a reason. It is what is most fair for the American people. It is what is most fair for the people of Ohio. Now, let's talk about how voting needs to be reformed. First and foremost, we have to institute photo ID, not just voter ID, but photo ID. Radical leftists like Morgan Harper will say, well, photo ID is racist. That is such a bunch of baloney. There's nothing racist about having to show a photo ID. In fact, if you're on welfare, you have to show a photo ID to get your welfare. If you're on unemployment, you have to show a photo ID to get your unemployment. There's nothing racist about having to show a photo ID to vote. Second, we need to get rid of these machines. Not just the Dominion machines, but all the machines. These machines were a solution in search of a problem that never existed. Third, we need to get rid of all of this vote by mail. Vote by mail allows people like Morgan Harper and leftist organizations funded by Mark Zuckerberg and others to commit fraud and cheating in the election system. And fourth, we got to get rid of this 30 days of voting. Go back to one day. It's called Election Day. Now listen, if you're a senior citizen or you're disabled or you're military overseas, you can vote by mail. Other than that, go to the polls.
Yeah, so right now what we have is a Republican Party that can't win by actually having a message or connecting with people in our communities who will support them. So they have to just cheat. And that is a real threat to our democracy. So mentioning things like photo ID and these as just, oh, simple little measures to ensure identification. No, we are living in 2022. Everyone knows who is eligible to vote, and we have the ability to, in fact, automatically register people to do so. So that's why I support passing the For the People Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. The Republican Party is trying to strip away our rights. And let's be clear, Ohioans know what's going on, and that you are also trying to target to make sure a lot of black people don't vote. And in the meantime, we are distracted from what we need to be focused on, which is ensuring that we have economic opportunity for every Ohioan. That is going to be my focus, creating up to 600,000 jobs over the next 10 years, and that is the type of U.S. Senate leadership that Ohio deserves.
All right. I just find it insulting for you to say that, like, somehow I'm trying to suppress the rights of blacks to vote. While you were prancing around, sipping lattes at Stanford and Princeton, I was serving in the United States Marine Corps overseas, putting my life in the hands of young black men, and they were putting their life in my hands. And so for you to tell me that I have not fought and I have not stood up for the rights of blacks or whites or Hispanics or Asians to vote, it's just, it's ridiculous. So you can go out there and ride your scooters with your liberals and drink your lattes with your liberals.
Mr. Mandel.
But the reality is,
Mandel.
I have actually
Mr.
stood
Mandel.
up for the right of people to vote.
Mr. Mandel, thank you. Wait.
The next question is for Ms. Harper. I'm going to take you back to that December interview again on Fox 8. On that interview, during that interview, you said that if Democrats don't believe in vaccines, that is a losing proposition. All right? Well, if you believe in vaccines that strongly, would you please tell us if you support mandatory COVID vaccinations for all undocumented aliens, as well as for all children as young as 2 years old?
So we have been living with this coronavirus pandemic for almost 2 years now. And I think a lot of us are exhausted. I know a lot of business owners have been impacted by this, and we have had a lot of lives lost. Almost 1 million people throughout our country, thousands of people here in Ohio. So my main focus is on making sure that we are able to continue to keep our economy going, that we are continuing to keep our kids in schools, and that we are keeping everyone as healthy as possible. And we know what the tools are to do that at this point. We need to make sure we have as many people vaccinated as possible, pursuant to the recommendations from scientific experts. We need to make sure that we are getting tests out to as many people as possible, so when people have been infected, they will not be at risk of infecting others. And we need to continue to have policies in place around masks that are going to keep young people who are not able to be vaccinated yet, and those who are immunocompromised, like my close friend who is currently battling cancer, to ensure that they are not accidentally infected and potentially at risk of losing their life. That is what we all need to stay focused on in order to ensure that we are healthy and safe. And that, in fact, has been my focus for the entire pandemic. At the beginning of the pandemic, started a grassroots organization to get people, to make sure that they had PPE, to get people to their vaccine appointments, elderly, immigrants, those who are immunocompromised, That's what leadership looks like, and that's what I've been about for the entire past 2 years.
I believe the question was, are you for or against mandatory vaccines for illegal immigrants? I'm going to yield 10 seconds of my time to Morgan to answer that question. Are you for or against mandatory vaccines for illegal immigrants?
That is not a focus
Right.
of what people...
Exactly.
Yeah,
Are you for or against it?
you're
You're
not
running for the
mine.
United States Senate. You got to answer questions. You might have to decide this. Are you
Oh.
for or against mandatory vaccines for illegal immigrants?
That is not what
Wait, who's the
people
politician
in-
here?
that
I'm going to
is-
ask for a third time. Are you for or against mandatory vaccines for illegal immigrants?
That's not what we're focused on right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you've seen it here first. You cannot run for the United States Senate and be afraid to answer simple questions. Of course, I am strongly against vaccine mandates for our kids. I'm strongly against allowing any illegal immigrants into this country. It's insane. These mandates were a way for politicians and bureaucrats in Washington to take control of the people. Now you're going to have 30 seconds to rebut. Let's hear the answer. Again, you have 30 seconds. Are you for or against these mandatory vaccines for
First of all, you are not the moderator of this debate, and I will say, as I stated in my initial answer to this question, we are all best protected when as many people in our community are vaccinated
That
as
wasn't the
possible. And that is what I have been consistent in supporting, and that is what is going to ensure that we continue to keep our economy on track. That's what people in Ohio care about, not the politicalization of people and immigrants, instead of focusing on the real issues that people in our state care about.
If you can't answer yes and no
right,
questions, then
thank-
you're not going to get elected to the United States Senate.
Thank you both. On to the next question, Jeff.
Big shout out to the sound man for getting them mics up. Give him a hand, y'all know it's hot.
They can't applaud the candidates, but they can applaud the mic
The
man.
mic and the sound man.
Thanks. We have our priorities.
Mr. Mandel, you emphatically believe that the former president, Donald Trump, was cheated out of the 2020 election. You believe that the election was actually stolen from him. So my question to you is, as it relates to Ohio, can you specify fraud cases or any prosecution in fraud cases concerning voter fraud, because you believe that the former president lost because of voter fraud and that the election was stolen from him? Can you verify or give us some type of idea of the percentage of fraud cases concerning voter fraud cases in Ohio? Thank you.
Those are three separate questions. As far as specific examples, yes, Hamilton County prosecutor Joe Dieters has prosecuted and convicted multiple people of voter fraud, and it's happened in other counties throughout the state. So there's a specific example. As far as like percentages in the state of Ohio, I've called for an audit of the election in Ohio, just the same way they did a forensic audit in Arizona, the same way that I've called for an audit in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, and all over the country. And a lot of Republicans will say, well, Josh, why do you want to audit Ohio? This is a state that Trump obviously won. Listen, I think if you audited Ohio, you would actually see that he won by a higher margin than was actually reported. We know that Mark Zuckerberg invested over $400 million that ended up going in taxpayer-funded organizations for get out the vote in heavily Democrat areas. How does that not violate equal protection? There were so many cases. You saw ballot harvesting in Philadelphia, ballot harvesting in Detroit. Polls closed at 7:30 at night. They wake up the next morning, there's a bunch of votes that came out of nowhere. Like, where did those votes come from? And so time and time again, and listen, I'm the only candidate in this race, Democrat or Republican, who actually took the time to go out to Maricopa County in Arizona where they're auditing the vote, saw it with my own two eyes, and so that's why I've called for an audit in every state in the union.
Who in Ohio asked you to do that? Who in Ohio is asking for people in our political system to be traveling to other states to investigate fraudulent claims of voter tampering? It's just not what people in Ohio are focused on. Here's what people in Ohio care about. We want to be a state of the future. We want to be guaranteeing opportunity for every Ohioan. We want to create 600,000 jobs in the clean energy sector. We want to make sure that those jobs are union protected. We want to make sure that you have housing, that you're not somehow susceptible to substandard landlords that are just forcing you to live in any condition. That's what I hear from Ohioans, no matter what part of the state I'm traveling in. And unlike a career politician who is my opponent right here today and my opponent in the Democratic Party, who are both funded by corporate interests, I will be focused on that. I'm not into the political gamemanship. I'm into service. I'm into results, not just the sloganeering and whatever big lie Donald Trump is forcing somebody to talk about.
This angry radical leftist is all about political gamesmanship. She can't even answer simple questions. She was asked 4 times within 30 seconds. Is she for or against mandatory vaccines for illegals? Is she for or against mandatory vaccines for kids? She can't even answer that. So you get up here and you call me names, call others names, but the reality is you sound like you've been in Washington for 30 years.
I just want to do a fact check, Mr. Mandel. So according to, and this comes from the Cincinnati Enquirer, according to the former Ohio Secretary of State, John Husted, who was now the Republican Lieutenant Governor, he conducted investigations and he concluded that there is some voter fraud that happens, but not in large numbers. And he said, in fact, it practically is microscopic compared with voter turnout from the year 2012, 2014, and 2016, the year former President Donald Trump, who was looking for the endorsement, was elected president that year. Houston found that there was 820 voting irregularities, and he referred out of that 820, 336 cases for prosecution. Voters that cast their votes during that time, it was 14.4 million ballots in those elections. So that comes out to be like 0.002, just so you know.
This next question is for Ms. Harper. Ms. Harper, would you please tell us if you would give unconditional support to protect and defend Israel if Iran attacks the Jewish state?
So I am in support of continuing to do what's necessary to protect Israel as a state. I also want to make it very clear that I am in support of the fact that both Israelis and Palestinians have human rights that need to be protected. And that is going to be my priority as a United States Senator, is ensuring all of those things, which is possible. And it's very important to make sure that we have leadership that is speaking to both our citizens here in Ohio on all sides of this issue, hearing from them. That's what I hear is what we are looking for in our next United States Senator, and that would be my focus in Washington.
Morgan, do you know the only country on the whole planet where Africans were not brought as slaves? The Jewish state of Israel. During the Civil Rights Movement, the best partners that Martin Luther King had were Jews. There were actually Jews who died marching hand in hand, arm in arm with MLK to advance the cause of civil rights. There's a reason why the Arab countries do not want the Palestinians. Because time and time again, the Palestinian leadership has acted like animals. They've used children as shields, women as shields. This is cowardly. The United States has one true friend in the Middle East, the Jewish state of Israel.
I really have to push back on some of this, honestly, very dangerous rhetoric that my opponent is stating here today. It is part of what leads into things like Islamophobia that we have seen happening in various parts of our state and our country, and it's really irresponsible for somebody who is trying to be in the United States Senate to stand up here and say that kind of thing. It's unacceptable.
Thank you.
Not true.
Miss,
Can you fact check that? Whether the Palestinian leadership puts women and children as human shields.
Both of your campaigns can do that. We have a limited amount of time, and you've got the next question, Jeff.
Thank you. And yeah, your campaign can do that. Ms. Harper, I want to talk about minimum wage. Do you, in fact, believe that the minimum wage should be $15? And what would you do if elected to combat the rising healthcare costs for families, hardworking, lower income families, middle class families as well? And in addition to that, I know it's a three-part question, but you're intelligent, I know you can answer it. How would you work across the aisle with your counterparts to get something passed, as we're seeing some of the gridlock in D.C. right now?
Yeah, so I mean, first I would say we find ourselves in a really precarious position for a lot of workers across our state, where wages haven't kept up with the cost of living. And this has a lot to do with unchecked corporate power, large multinationals that have taken over both our economy and our democracy, funding the campaigns of my opponent here today and my opponent in the Democratic primary. And so we need to have very clear solutions to support working people in our state, and the federal minimum wage is one of those. So $15 is a minimum. Most places in Ohio, you need to be earning about $20 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom apartment at this point. We also need to recognize that healthcare is a key part of people being able to maintain a stable life. And right now, medical debt is one of the biggest drivers of debt and threats to the financial situation of a lot of families across our state. And so to do something about that, we need universal health care. We need Medicare for all. We need to check big pharma, big insurance that have been funding my opponent here today and my opponent in the Democratic primary to keep this status quo where we see thousands and thousands of people, for example, in Ohio, who lost their health care coverage during the pandemic. It's not acceptable, it has led us less healthy, and it is also a threat to our economy. And in terms of working across the aisle, well, so during my time in the Obama administration at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, developing regulation, very, very used to bringing in people of all different backgrounds and interests and perspectives to come together to make policy, solve problems. That's the same approach I would bring to the United States Senate, and I am making that commitment to people in Ohio. That's the kind of leadership we need.
Mr. Mandel?
I told that story earlier about being at Town Hall, the bar and restaurant down the street, where I told folks that I'm going to debate Morgan Harper. She's like AOC, almost only smarter. After hearing that answer, I actually think she's like AOC, only dumber. Because the reality is, if we had universal health care in this country, it would bring down the quality of health care for every American citizen. In fact, there are Canadians, when they have heart problems, have to come across to the Cleveland Clinic to have heart surgeries. And this restaurant I was at, Town Hall, and you go to other restaurants and bars.
You were with your kids before this debate started.
Please don't interrupt each other. Please, you each have a certain amount of time, and you agree to these rules.
And
Both of you agree.
You go to other restaurants and bars and just small businesses throughout the Cleveland area, throughout the state of Ohio. They'd get crushed by policies like this. It's not big corporations that get crushed by this increased federal minimum wage. It's actually small businesses that employ hardworking men and women as waiters, as waitresses, as busboys, as valets. That's the working class in this country you're trying to crush.
That's your time.
No, just not true. In fact, almost every small business owner that I talk to around the state recognizes that one of the biggest burdens they face is having to provide benefits to their employees. It is a huge burden to small business owners. It sometimes is eating up to a third of revenue having to provide these benefits, and it is heartbreaking to have to employ someone and not be able to afford to give them the coverage they need. So let's talk about what's going to help our small business owners. This is going to be a boon for small businesses. This is also going to level the playing field about who can be an entrepreneur. Because right now we have a lot of people who are stuck in jobs they don't like because they have to get health care coverage for a child, for example.
Thank you, Ms. Harper.
Guaranteeing opportunity for every Ohioan. That's what we're about. That's what Ohio needs.
Thank you. Next question is for Ms. Harper. A disproportionate number of people of color are being arrested and incarcerated in jails nationwide. Would you please tell us if you support eliminating bail for poor people when they're arrested?
So I support looking at our criminal justice system holistically. And what we see right now is that what we're doing is not sustainable. We have rising prison populations. We are now having a hard time even staffing our prisons in Ohio because of the nature of both the work and also just how much of a demand there is. This isn't what is going to make us a state of the future. And so I think we need to, from a federal perspective, really look at some of the sentencing guidelines that have led to an increase in the prison population. I think we need to look at just how much we have disinvested in our communities to create the situations where people are getting into criminal situations in the first place. And we also need to look at things like the bail system and how we can make sure that we are both doing what we can to enforce the law, protect the safety of our communities, but more than anything, creating opportunity for every Ohioan. That's what we need to be focused on. And in order to get that done, we need to have a United States Senator who is not bought out to corporate interests who are profiting off of the status quo. That is who is funding both my opponent here today and my opponent in the Democratic primary. It is time for us to have a U.S. Senator who is for us every single day. It's our turn, Ohio.
Morgan, for someone who's never held public office, you sound like you've been in the swamp for 30 years. The question was, in case you didn't hear it, are you for or against eliminating bail? Are you for or against eliminating bail?
You are not the moderator of this debate, okay? And so this is your time to answer questions. I just answered the question.
You don't think
now
angry.
it's your
You're
time.
getting very angry.
Not angry at all.
Okay, folks, you both agreed to the format. You both agreed. Mr. Mandel, you've got how much time roughly? 35 seconds to respond, and then Ms. Harper will have 30 seconds as a rebuttal. These were the rules that both campaigns agreed to. So please, sir, go ahead.
I'm against eliminating bail. We've seen time and time again, people get out of prison, and they kill again, they rob again, they rape again. Of course we shouldn't get rid of bail. It's insane. I'll yield the rest of my time, plus your 30 seconds, so you can actually answer the question.
Here's the question that Ohioans really want you to answer. Why are you running for the United States Senate? What is your vision for us as a state? What is your answer to the fact that we have a 24-year-old getting killed down the street just 2 days ago from where we're standing? What is your answer to that we have young people who are dropping dead from overdoses all over our state? You have no answers. It's just slogans and lies. And what we need to be focused on as a state is creating opportunity. That's what Ohioans want to hear from us, and that's what I'm focused on.
Thank you both. Jeff has the next question.
Thank you, Dimitri. Appreciate you. In 1982, Mr. Mandel, President Ronald Reagan, he signed a 25-year extension as it relates to voting for the Voting Rights Act, right? And a part of that bill, it prohibited violation of voting rights by any practices that discriminated based on race, regardless of if the practices had been adopted with the intent to discriminate or not. In the previous debate, you were asked about the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and you said that you would not support it. And that bill protects the rights of Black Americans, African Americans. My question to you is, if you're not willing to support that bill, how are you protecting the rights of Black Americans?
Yeah, when I wake up in the morning, I don't think about any specific race. I think about protecting the rights of all Americans. And frankly, I think the American people are sick and tired of radical leftists like Morgan Harper and others.
Excuse me, ma'am. Let him talk.
Like Morgan Harper and others, trying to divide our country and our kids down racial lines. I see my friend Shirley Smith in the back. We served in the legislature together. And listen, she and I agreed sometimes, disagreed sometimes, whatever, but the reality is, people like me and her, we woke up in the morning, we're like, hey, let's just do what's right for the people of our state. Let's do what's right for the people of our country. And at the end of the day, as I said earlier, when I was in the Marine Corps, we were protecting every single American citizen. It didn't matter if they were black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Democrat, Republican, independent, libertarian, vegetarian, whatever they were. And I feel the same way about voting rights. It's the election should be fair for every citizen across the board, and we should make it hard to cheat and easy to vote.
Interesting, because my opponent has also said that he doesn't believe in early voting, that was tonight, doesn't believe in vote by mail, which you talk to most working people in our state, and these are two policies that ensure, regardless of what job you have, regardless of how many kids you have, regardless of what your child care situation is, it allows you to be able to exercise your right to vote. And let's get back to what's right. because I'm really curious about how it was the right thing for Ohio in the middle of a pandemic for you to be burning masks and traveling to cheesecake factories in New York to mock the things that are protecting life, like vaccines. So break it down for me how exactly you are focused on what's right. More, what we're seeing is this is about what you would expect from somebody who's been in politics for 20 years. We have very little to reflect from it in his time in office for our state, and it's the exact challenge that I see in my Democratic primary opponent. 20 years, no results, just sloganeering. We're over it. We need real leadership and people who are ready to solve problems.
I can't rebut all that about the mask and all that stuff in 30 seconds, but I will say I spent all day with my kids. You know, the kids are off school today. And as I mentioned earlier, Gideon is 5, Judah is 7, and Rosie is 8. There is nothing healthy or sanitary about putting a face diaper on a 5-year-old kid. It is a form of child abuse.
What we weren't talking about. We're talking about you
I'm sorry,
going
you
to
were
burn masks.
you were the one who brought up masks, so
Not talking about children and not talking about masks.
Why don't you use my time? Go ahead.
The question was to you, Mr. Mandel, how are you going to protect the rights of blacks in America if you're not willing to vote on the John Lewis Act? And that's all.
That's a 30-second response.
Yeah,
30 seconds.
30
Yes, go
seconds
ahead.
to you, sir. So that's the question.
Just because you call something a Voting Rights Act doesn't make it a Voting Rights Act.
Right.
And like the reality is, we shouldn't think about protecting the rights of any specific race or religion or creed. We should be thinking about protecting the rights of every American. And that's where radical leftists like you're so focused on race and you want to make everything about race. Americans are sick of it.
All right, next question is from Mr. Mandel. Social media platforms, including Twitter, Facebook, Meta, and others, are accused of targeting conservatives by shadow banning them and even deplatforming them and doing other things trying to silence them, including apparently something that happened to you today. According to your one of your tweets, Facebook's Ministry of Truth suspended me for saying we should put American military veterans ahead of illegal immigrants. Those ungrateful elites have no appreciation that their freedom exists only because American servicemen stand watch in dark places across the globe. And you included this warning that from Twitter, you can't post or comment for 24 hours. So my question, sir, is this. Would you please tell us if you think the solution to big tech is more government intervention or simply allowing the free market to do what it's been doing, even to you?
Sure. Well, let me explain what happened today and answer the question. Yeah, I was kicked off Facebook today because I posted online that we should put American military veterans ahead of illegals. And I said as long as we have thousands of veterans living underneath bridges, we should not be spending a penny of taxpayer money on illegal aliens.
But what's your plan for housing them? What is your plan for actually solving the problem? I'm still waiting for it.
Facebook said this was a form of quote-unquote hate speech and deplatformed me, kicked me off. First of all, if you went up to most Democrats in Ohio, forget about Republicans and independents, they would think we should put veterans before illegals. And the totality of this country, of course, thinks that. It's only a teeny tiny percentage of radical leftists like Morgan Harper and AOC and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and Bernie Sanders who actually think it's okay to put illegals ahead of veterans. And listen, we got to take on these big tech companies. You know, I think we should eliminate their Section 230 protection. They shouldn't have some type of exemption from liability. They are restricting and stomping on the freedom of speech of everyday Americans.
So my opponent here would like to believe, and it's probably because he hasn't had a lot of productive multitasking during his political career, that we can only do one thing at a time. But I'm here to let Ohio know that we can solve multiple problems simultaneously, and in fact, that's the type of leadership we should expect from our next United States Senator. So he's mentioned several times issue around immigration. We 100% need comprehensive immigration reform. We need to create pathways to citizenship. That is something that enables stories like my mother's, who immigrated to this country, who adopted me and my brother, who has been part of a community, made it possible because we had a functional system. We need to make sure that we're ensuring that that is the story of America. But we also need to be challenging him on solutions, not just these sound bites. Create housing, present an opportunity for all of our veterans to also be safe and healthy and free. And I have not heard any of that from you. Still waiting. And in the meantime, with Big Tech, I in fact have testified before Congress, because Big Tech does represent a threat to our democracy and our economy, testified before the Antitrust Subcommittee about the need to both break them up and also address their power.
30 seconds.
First of all, Morgan, are you okay? Like, the question was about big tech, and you're talking about immigration. Are you okay? And second of all, why are you getting so angry? You don't have to get angry. The reality is these big tech companies are the enemy. These Silicon Valley elites, they look down on people like us from the state of Ohio, and we need United States senators who will take them on. That is exactly what I will do in the United States Senate.
Okay, okay. I'm gonna get one more question, then we'll have to close because we gotta get out of here. Please, let's keep the sound effects. Let's respect the candidates, okay? This will be the last question for the night, and we'll have the closing statements from both candidates. Mr. Mandel, according to a report that was published by AmericaHealthRankings.org, the unemployment rate amongst blacks in Ohio is 10.4%. This is 3.3 percentage points higher than the national average amongst black Americans. My question to you is, what is your agenda and what plan do you have that would jumpstart economic impact in the black community?
Well, again, when I think of economic growth, and I think of jobs, and I think of education, I think of it for the entire state of Ohio, and I think of it for our country. I don't wake up in the morning, thinking about things down racial lines. Martin Luther King said, let's judge people based on the content of one's character, not the color of one's skin. And so let's stop with every question.
Hey, y'all, listen, hey, y'all, listen. Hey, hold, wait a minute. No, hold on. Listen, we had a conversation before this thing started, before we started this event, that we're going to respect the candidates. We're not going to have any outbursts. Okay? Please respect the rules. He is disrespecting us by calling us animals, thugs, all kinds of stuff. Listen, you an animal. Listen, that is not okay. Hey, listen, hey, my man. Respect for the people that are here. Hey, my man, black, listen. You don't have to get angry. Listen, man. Hey, yo, I'm the moderator. Please. Respect. Fact checker. Well, no, listen, whatever I am, you in the audience, I'm running the show. So please, man, I'm gonna ask you to leave if you keep talking. Oh, me?
Yes, you.
Please.
One thought. We both respect the candidates. We may not agree with them, but we both respect them both. Their campaigns had asked no interaction with the audience because it's being streamed. These are their requests, so please honor their requests. We're almost done. They each need 2 minutes, up to 2 minutes to close. We want to give each one of them equal opportunity, and we are pressed for time. So out of respect to the candidates, both of them, if you would please honor their requests. Now, I understand your feelings, I do, but please honor that. Plus, we're pressed for time. So
thank
Jeff,
you. So I just wanted Mr. Mandel to finish his answer, and then I would like to give Ms. Harper an opportunity to rebuttal.
Let me talk about something that's central to jobs in
Ohio. Do you need me to repeat the question?
It's about jobs.
Okay.
Let me talk about something that's central to jobs.
It was about black people. That's what the question was about.
Thank you.
Again, when I think about jobs for our state, I think of what's best for the totality of our state. Whether someone's black, white, Hispanic, Asian, I want to do what's best for the 11.7 million people of the state of Ohio. A lot of people don't realize this. If you took the state of Ohio, the state of Pennsylvania, and the state of West Virginia, and you combine these three states into a region, that region would be the third largest producer of natural gas in the entire world. Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia. When Trump was in here, he said, in a responsible way that protects the air we breathe and the water we drink, let's drill for this natural gas. Jobs for our people. Lower energy costs to heat homes in the winter. Lower energy costs for manufacturing companies so they can hire more people and increase wages. One of the most important things we could do to increase economic development in our state is to increase natural resource development in our state. But you have radical leftists like Morgan Harper, AOC, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. These people are loony, who are saying, let's not drill in America, but let's allow Putin to drill in Russia. Let's allow Xi to drill in China. Let's allow the Indians to do it in India. Come on. One of the most important things we can do for jobs, economic strength, national security, is to drill for all the natural gas we can here in Ohio, here in America.
Ms. Harper.
Let's talk about what's radical and loony. That any time a black woman is standing before you and has an opinion, that somehow that suddenly becomes angry and out of line. So that's radical. And you better be prepared to have a lot of black people stating what we need and what we are advocating for in front of you, and be able to do that without pulling on racist tropes, because that's what we've heard a lot of tonight. And so what the question was about was creating economic opportunity for the black community, and it should be a priority for anyone who's thinking of being in the U.S. Senate. And here's what my plan is. We are going to be creating jobs, as I've said, in the clean energy sector, including in neighborhoods like this one, building out public transit infrastructure, making sure that these are jobs that are union protected. We are going to get rid of student debt, which is one of the biggest burdens facing our generation. We are going to make sure that we are keeping jobs up with the cost of living, and we are going to ensure that we have access to universal health care, including mental health care, addiction recovery services. This is what we need, this is what we deserve, and what we cannot have happen is have a U.S. Senator who is bought out to corporate interests, like my opponent here today and my opponent in the Democratic Party.
Thank you, Ms. Harper. Mr. Mandel, you can rebut, and then we'll have the closing arguments.
Yeah, I just think it's a form of racism to say that we should have certain economic development for certain races and certain... It's just like how Joe Biden, I think it's racist where he says he's only going to nominate a black woman. How about nominating the most qualified person as possible for the Supreme Court? And if it ends up being a black woman, so be it. But let's judge people and make decisions as public policymakers based on the merit. Let's do what's best for all the people in Ohio.
We've never had a black woman on the Supreme
Okay.
Court. Okay.
You would have if it wasn't for Joe Biden.
Okay, no more outbursts. I'm asking, please respect the candidates. They're debating, not you.
I believe we're almost out of time
Yeah,
as
we're out
well,
of time. We
because
gotta-
again, we're streaming this,
Yes.
so each will have 2 minutes to respond and not to be interrupted by the
Correct.
other person. Should we do, let's say, we started with Ms. Harper, so let's start with Mr. Mandel.
Yep, and then she can close out.
All right, with
Mr.
that-
Mandel, your closing remark? 2 minutes,
Up to
please.
2 minutes.
Thank you.
Great. This election I'm running in here on May 3rd, it's not about electing a Republican. And this November, not about electing a Republican. It's about electing the right kind of Republican. Time and time and time again, we've seen squishy rhino Republicans go to Washington. Say one thing in Ohio, do another thing in Washington. Time and time and time again. We've seen Republicans who said they were for the America First agenda, but then they go there and they vote for impeachment. The reality is, we need to send fighters to Washington. Pro-liberty, pro-freedom, constitutional conservatives. When you go on my website, it says that I am pro-God, pro-gun, pro-liberty, pro-Trump. Pro-God because we have to protect life from conception to natural death. We have to stop this transgender craziness being pushed on our kids. Pro-gun because the Second Amendment is what protects the rest of the Constitution and all of our other constitutional rights. It protects us from tyranny, from our own government. Pro-liberty, stop the craziness of mask mandates and vaccine mandates and return the freedom to moms and dads to make decisions what's best for our kids. And pro-Trump, because the America First agenda created the best statistics when it comes to unemployment, when it comes to jobs, when it comes to health care, when it comes to graduation rates, for people of all colors in this country. President Trump was the best president the black community, the white community, the Asian community, the Hispanic community has had in any of our lifetimes.
Thank you. Thank you. And now, Ms. Harper, you have up to 2 minutes for your closing statement.
It's really easy for my opponent and career politicians like him to try to disregard the experiences of real people, of us, of black people, of a lot of other types of people in our state who are truly struggling. And those are the stories that I've heard over the last several months traveling around our state. Small business owners in Southeast Ohio who are concerned about how they're going to be able to stay competitive when we've turned our economy over to big ag. People in Columbus who in certain neighborhoods aren't able to get jobs or afford transit to get to those jobs. People who are facing the impacts of the ongoing drug epidemics. These are the real issues that Ohioans care about. And let's talk about what he knows. One, we learned from last debate, no familiarity with the U.S. Constitution, doesn't even understand that we have separation of church and state. Two, talking about pro-life. What about the lives of thousands of Ohioans that have been lost to the coronavirus, to violence, as I mentioned, just down the street from where we stand right now? People like him and my opponent in the Democratic primary are funded by special interests. That is who they are beholden to. They are not for us. I am running for the United States Senate to bring true community-first leadership to Ohio. How I got here has a lot to do with my family's experience of going from rock bottom all the way to being able to stabilize. A lot of accusations about the fact that I'm elitist. I am proud that my mother worked so hard to be able to put me in an opportunity to get scholarships, to go to great schools, and that has what made me laser focused on bringing that same opportunity to every Ohioan. We can do this, Ohio. It is our turn. We have to put an end to a generation of career politicians who are about themselves and distraction and get one of us to Washington, D.C. Let's do it. MorganHarper.org. Morganize. It is our turn, and we are ready to go. Thank you.
And that's good. Round two. Already done.
Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us this evening as well, and also online, and thank all of our technical people as well. Thank you. Drive carefully.
Good
We'll
evening.
shake your hand, Josh.
You guys want to do an interview before they? Are you recording?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Josh.
Yes.
Okay, you don't want to do one?
We have to have it edited, like, we have to have it written 20 minutes.
My dad.
Okay, yeah. You gotta win. Oh my God. Oh yeah. Yes. He's never gonna stop.
How was the audio work out? I'm not going to sound like Canada or something.